Gameplan.com, where football makes sense. I'm Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Bring you our college football rivalry week wraparound. We're going to go across the college football landscape and take a look at some of the big-time rivalries that are going on this week in college football. But first, let's start off out west, where Washington and Washington State play for the Apple Cup.
The Cougars have played some good football overall this season in Mike Leach's second year as head coach. Their bowl eligibility can be directly tied to both their ability to score and their ability to get teams off the field on third down, as well as tightening up in the red zone. Wazoo boasts an impressive secondary led by cornerback DeMonte Horton and free safety Deion Buchanan. Both guys combined for 10 interceptions, but it's their run defense that will be tested this week, as the Huskies have one of the top backs in the country in Bishop Sankey. Sankey has rushed for nearly 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns, and Washington also has a healthy set of wide receivers and tight ends. But the biggest question will be if senior quarterback Keith Price will be ready to go. And I like the Huskies in this ball game because of their ability to get to the quarterback, and I expect their defensive line to be in the face of Connor Holiday all game long. Next up, we have Arkansas taking on LSU, and a once promising start to the season has now turned bad for the Razorbacks. Losers of 8 straight games, Arkansas can go into the offseason on a positive note if they're able to win the Golden Boot versus LSU. If they're going to pull off the upset, it'll have to be with the passing game. We know the Razorbacks can run the football with true freshman Alex Collins and Jonathan Williams, but they need better play from the passing game. For LSU, they're coming off a dominating victory over Texas A&M, and it was the best all-around performance the Tigers have put up all season long. The biggest matchup LSU will have to win in this ballgame will be in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Arkansas is very stout up front on offense, as well as defensive end Chris Smith leads a very aggressive pass rush. But I like LSU in this ballgame. Arkansas is too one-dimensional to knock off the Tigers, and I think LSU will do a great job in stopping the running game. Next up, we have the Egg Bowl between Ole Miss and Mississippi State, and it's always an exciting game, and this year won't be any different. Ole Miss has a young and extremely talented football team that has played better over the last couple of weeks. Now, last week, that defense played well versus number 8 Missouri, but the offense could not get in sync all game long. This week, look for the Rebels to work their running game a little bit more versus a Bulldogs defense that struggles in that department. For Mississippi State, they can become bowl eligible with a victory, but in order for that to happen, they'll need freshman quarterback Damian Williams to be efficient with the ball and not put the offense in bad situations. Defensively, you look at defensive end Danico Autry having to play with discipline versus an Ole Miss offense that does a lot of misdirection in the running game. You have to maintain that line of scrimmage and let guys like linebacker Benardrick McKinney clean up the mess. I like the Rebels in this ballgame. Too much offensive firepower and athleticism on defense. I think they'll roll big versus Mississippi State. The Civil War, they call it, pits the Oregon State Beavers against the Oregon Ducks, and right off the bat, the Beavers defense, more in particular the perimeter defense, will have to be ready to play more so than what's happened in the last 4 weeks. And all is not lost, however. I'm a big fan of their offensive weapons that they have in wide receiver Brandon Cooks and both tailbacks Storm Woods and Teron Ward. The constant shuffling along that offensive line has curtailed their output on the ground, but they are still talented tailbacks. As for Oregon, the reason why the Beavers pose a serious threat to this Ducks defense is because OSU can line up and run downhill, and that's been the real reason why Oregon has dropped 2 out of the last 3 games. Offensively, I think they'll be fine, even if Mariota is not at 100%. I believe the Ducks still have enough offensive firepower to knock off the Beavers. Next up, we have Florida State taking on the Florida Gators, and the Seminoles coming to this ballgame red hot, averaging 52 points a game while only giving up 13. And I look at the defensive side of the ball, and I believe the biggest key will be the front 7 versus the Gators' ground game. Florida State will see a rushing attack that's similar to both Pitt and Boston College, meaning you're going to see a lot of power, counter, ISO, and lead. And this is one of the worst seasons in a very long time for the Florida Gators. And if Muschamp and company can't pull off the monumental upset, they're going to have to win 2 out of the 3 phases of the game. And in my opinion, it has to be defense and special teams. Forcing early 3-and-outs and winning the field position battle could give these guys a chance, but I can't see the Seminoles slipping up in this one. I like Florida State. One of the best rivalries in college football is between Ohio State and Michigan, and the Buckeyes are getting healthier on the defensive side of the ball this week, getting linebacker Curtis Grant and cornerback Deion Grant back, and that should be huge for both units. The biggest concern for Ohio State will be matching up versus the potent weapons on the flanks for Michigan as Gallen, Chesson, and Funches, who's played like an All-American this year at the tight end position. Linebacker Ryan Shazier will have to once again be a versatile player that'll need to excel on both ends of defense. And offensively, it's a crime that Braxton Miller hasn't garnered more Heisman Trophy consideration. He's doing an outstanding job once again this season for the Buckeyes. Wolverines have been inconsistent the last couple of weeks, but what they have been consistent with all season long has been explosive plays. This week versus Ohio State, look for the Wolverines to try to exploit the matchups in the secondary. There's an opportunity for the Wolverines to connect on some big plays deep down the field if Gardner is patient in the pocket and continues to work through those options in the passing game. As always, this will be a great game that'll ultimately come down to which offensive line is able to control the line of scrimmage, and I have to go with the Buckeyes in this one because of Mew Hort and company paving the way for the bruising tailback Carlos Hyde. Georgia takes on Georgia Tech, and they call this game clean old-fashioned hate, and the Bulldogs will be playing without record-setting quarterback Aaron Murray, who tore his ACL last week versus Kentucky. That means junior quarterback Hudson Mason, who has played in 11 games in his Bulldog career, will get the start. The good thing that he has helping him out this week is arguably the best back in the country in Todd Gurley, and playing behind a solid offensive line with capable targets on the flanks. Mason's biggest job will be to not turn the ball over and to keep this offense in manageable situations. For the Yellow Jackets, I've been impressed all season long with their defense led by defensive end Jeremiah Attachu. Georgia Tech has done well versus the run but has issues covering tight ends, and this week they'll face Arthur Lynch, and I still like Georgia Tech in this ball game because Tech's offense led by Vad Lee will be able to move the football versus Georgia, and defensively they'll be able to keep the Bulldogs offense one-dimensional without Aaron Murray, so look for Georgia Tech to knock off Georgia in this outstanding rivalry game that's going to take place in Atlanta. The Territorial Cup is at stake as Arizona and Arizona State get together, and the Wildcats are fresh off their blowout victory over number 5 Oregon, mostly due to the legs of Kadeem Carey, who ran for over 200 yards. But you have to give credit to an Arizona defense that out-physicaled the Ducks up front. Now this week versus the Sun Devils, the key matchup will be the Wildcat linebackers versus Grice and Foster on the perimeter and how well they can match up versus their versatility. This has been a different Sun Devil football team since the Notre Dame game. More in particular, a different defense is what has changed. They've been more gap and assignment sound, and it's that gap discipline that will be needed this week versus the read option ground game of Arizona. And I like the balance of that Sun Devil offense, and because of that balance and their ability to manufacture matchup problems for a defense, I like them in the game as well to knock off Arizona. Virginia Tech takes on Virginia for the Commonwealth Cup, and the Hokies have started to play better and much more efficiently on offense, especially quarterback Logan Thomas, who's starting to spread the ball around and is taking what the defense gives him. And speaking of defense, the Hokies have a pretty darn good one. Their front seven is extremely disruptive, led by linebacker Jack Tyler and defensive end James Gale. This week versus the Cavaliers, they're dealing with a massive offensive line of Virginia that does a great job in running the football, and it's well documented about the size of the Hokies' defensive front, so needless to say, they're going to have to beat them with speed at the line of scrimmage in order to have a shot. The Cavaliers are not as bad as their record may indicate. They play hard each and every Saturday, especially along the defensive line. Brent Urban is a phenomenal player on the inside, and it's that interior pressure that is needed to slow down the Hokies' offense. Now, offensively, can they avoid the big mistake in the passing game? That's the biggest question for Virginia. I don't think they can. So look for Virginia Tech to slow down Kevin Parks and the Cavs' ground game and take home the Commonwealth Cup. The Palmetto Bowl is between Clemson and South Carolina, and this is another huge test for both teams. When you look at Clemson in this ball game, they're the perfect combination of flash and fundamentals. Now this week versus the Gamecocks, I would scale back on design run plays for Taj Boyd. Instead, to use his mobility, just move the pocket to give him different launch spots. But in all honesty, this game has to be played like the BC game. The Tigers will need an effort, an A-plus effort from their offensive line in the running game in order to win. The Gamecocks on offense must win on the flanks in the passing game. Wide receiver Bruce Ellington and Demir Boyd have to be able to win one-on-one battles. Now on defense, Jadeveon Clowney and that defensive line has to squeeze the running game. They must play inside out, and the perimeter defenders have to be able to make plays in space. And I think this will be one of the better games of the weekend, and I actually like Clemson to win this game because of their third down defense and their ability to win versus the run. A huge battle in Conference USA's East Division between East Carolina and Marshall, and the Pirates are literally 2 plays away from being undefeated, and that's how good Ruffin McNeil's squad has been on both sides of the ball. Now defensively, they're going to have to curb their aggressiveness this week versus Rakeem Cato and the explosive Thundering Herd offense, and East Carolina's linebackers are excellent, but this week, how well can they cover in space? That'll be put to the test versus the Thundering Herd. And we've talked about the outstanding Marshall quarterback Cato, but the real threat you want to look out for is tight end Gator Hoskins. Hoskins leads the team in touchdowns with 12 and is a matchup nightmare for opposing defenses. Defensively, the Herd must stay active at the line of scrimmage as East Carolina's quarterback Shane Carden flatlines a lot of his passes, which could ultimately lead to tip passes, which could then lead to turnovers. I like ECU in this ballgame. I think honestly it'll be a shootout, but East Carolina has the ability to match up in the secondary if it came down to a defense needing to make a play, so I'm going with the Pirates to win this one versus the Thundering Herd. Next, we have the Bayou Classic, which is between Southern and Grambling, and the Jaguars enter the Bayou Classic atop the West Division in the SWAC, and they'll play Jackson State in the SWAC Championship. And Southern is a well-oiled machine offensively led by quarterback Dre Joseph, who has done a solid job in forcing defenses to cover every quadrant of the field. That offensive line, however, needs to do a better job in pass pro because Grambling's defensive line does a great job in playing on your side of the line of scrimmage with defensive end Donovan McCray leading the way. He's a freshman and he has 11.5 TFLs and 4 sacks. For the Tigers in this ballgame, the biggest key will be their offense. They will have to make plays in the passing game to keep Southern honest defensively, but the Jaguars do have problems in stopping the run, so if I'm Grambling's tailback Justin Kelly, I'm chomping at the bits to tote the rock this week. I like Southern in this game. Grambling just doesn't have the depth on the back end to contend with Southern's potent passing game, so look for the Jaguars to walk away Bayou Classic champions. In this year's edition of the Battle on the Bayou, the UL Monroe Warhawks need a victory in order to get to bowl eligibility, and a normally potent offensive attack for UL Monroe has struggled with consistency all season long. What they still have the potential to do is hit the big play in the passing game by taking advantage of the Cajuns' aggressiveness on defense. Safety Isaiah Newsom will play a huge role defensively in being the alley defender versus the explosive running game of Louisiana. And for the Raging Cajuns, I've been most impressed with freshman tailback Elijah McGuire and what he brings to the table in terms of a breakaway threat as a runner and a receiver out of the backfield. And this is still a Cajuns defense that doesn't necessarily get to the quarterback all that well, and they can't allow Colton Browning to break contain. I like the Raging Cajuns in this ballgame. UL Monroe's defense struggles versus the run, and they'll have problems slowing down the Cajuns' two-headed monster in McGuire and Alonzo Harris. Bowling Green takes on Buffalo in what is a big game for the East Division title in the MAC, and for Bowling Green, the defense has been the name of the game all year long. The Falcons particularly excel in the red zone with opponents only scoring 55% of the time, and on offense they've got excellent balance, but what has been a concern at times has been the offensive line and pass protection, and that's not what you want to hear when you have Khalil Mack and Kobe Wade coming to town. The Bulls defense thrives on the ability to get sacks and cause turnovers, and they're led by Buckets Award candidate Khalil Mack, who has 10.5 sacks and 16.5 TFLs, and he's a team leader in both categories as well as team leader in tackles. But what has been the most impressive element of the Bulls season has been the efficient play of quarterback Joe Laseda, who has done a great job operating off play action because of the running of Brandon Oliver, who's an all-MAC performer. And I like Bowling Green in this ballgame. This game, in my opinion, will come down to special teams, and Bowling Green has one of the best units in the country, so look for the Falcons to take home the MAC East Division title. In football, Duke and North Carolina play for the victory bell, and the Blue Devils have been on a 7-game winning streak, and they've done it every way possible with great offense, stout defense, excellent special teams. This week versus North Carolina, the focus will be the pass defense and slowing down tight end Eric Ebron. For the Tar Heels, quarterback Marquise Williams gives them a dual threat option at quarterback, and that right there is enough to keep a Blue Devil defense off balance. The biggest challenge defensively will be to take away wide receiver Jamison Crowder, their #1 option, and forcing those other receiving targets to make plays consistently. I like the Tar Heels in this ballgame. They've won 5 in a row. Their defense has gotten better, while offensively they've become more balanced and much more dynamic. I think they'll knock off the Duke Blue Devils, in which should be a great game in the ACC. This is the 77th meeting between Fresno State and San Jose State, and everyone talks about the Bulldogs offense and their superstar quarterback Derek Carr, along with talented wide receiver Devontae Adams, and rightfully so, great players, but it has been the Bulldogs defense that's a good reason why they are undefeated. Free safety Darren Smith is the next in a long line of talented Bulldog defensive backs as he leads the team with 5 interceptions, and he's going to have to read the eyes of quarterback David Fells this week and do an excellent job of that, because David Fells is a very talented quarterback that does a great job in influencing defenders. And I have no doubt about the Spartans offense. I'm more concerned about their ability to stop the run. That's the one area where they have struggled all season long. And the biggest matchup you want to look out for will be on the outside between cornerback Bené Benwickery and Devontae Adams. Benwickery can make himself a lot of money in this ball game, but I like Fresno State in this matchup. Running back Josh Quezada and that big offensive line should have a field day versus San Jose. It's always a great game when the Volunteers and Wildcats kick off on the gridiron, no matter the record, and two things you want to watch out for in this ball game will be which young quarterback can step up and keep their offense on pace. Tennessee's freshman Joshua Dobbs or Kentucky's sophomore Jalen Whitlow. The good thing Dobbs has going for him is a solid running game with RAGIN Neal and two outstanding receiving targets in Pig Howard and Marquez North. Defensively for Kentucky, I actually like their front seven. The issue has mainly been their inability to consistently get stops on third down and poor run fits. I like Tennessee in this ball game. Look for Dobbs to connect on some big plays deep downfield in the passing game to lead them to victory. A classic cross-country rivalry between Notre Dame and Stanford as they play for the Legends Trophy. And for the Fighting Irish in this ball game, the defensive game plan is simple. They have to win on first down, bracket tie Montgomery. I know that's easier said than done, but Notre Dame has a defensive personnel at every level to make it work. Now for Stanford, you look at quarterback Kevin Hogan having to make better decisions with the football. The Irish will try to force him to make plays consistently in the passing game, so I'd open up by breaking tendencies very early by working the short to intermediate area, getting the other receiving targets involved, and then coming back to the ground game, which you know you can do so well. I like Stanford in this ball game. This has more to do with the Cardinal defense than it does with their offense. I think Stanford will be able to force a couple of turnovers and will quote-unquote out-possession Notre Dame to victory. They call this the Shula Bowl as Florida International takes on Florida Atlantic, and FIU has struggled offensively to put points on the board, only averaging 10 points a game, and it's due to the lack of production they've gotten from their offensive line all season. They struggle on both ends of offense, both run blocking and pass protection. Florida Atlantic, on the other hand, is a very young football squad that has gone through the ups and downs that you would expect of a young team, and that has been that inconsistency that has them not where they want to be. These are usually two very good football squads, but they're both in a down year. I like Florida Atlantic because of their ability to get pressure on the quarterback, going against an offensive line that has given up 44 sacks on the season. Look for quarterback Jaquez Johnson to come up big versus the Golden Panthers of FIU. And finally, we have the Iron Bowl between Auburn and Alabama. Both teams ranked in the top 5. Alabama number 1, Auburn number 4. And Alabama's defense has held 9 opponents to 10 points or less this year. And this week they face a unique offense that's predicated on misdirection and taking advantage of a defense being out of position. That's why I believe the biggest X factor in this game for the Tide will be nose tackle Brandon Ivory. His ability to get interior pressure will be huge. On offense, A.J. McCarron will see a ton of pressure from the Tigers defense, especially from tremendous edge rusher D Ford. So it'll be up to McCarron to not get sloppy with his pocket presence and be able to distribute the football quickly. I'm a big fan of Auburn's ground game. Look at running backs Trey Mason and Cameron Artis-Payne. They've been very impressive all year long, and you toss in quarterback Nick Marshall's legs as well, and you have yourself a three-headed monster that is averaging over 6.5 yards a carry. As great as they've been on the ground, Marshall and company will have to make plays in the passing game in order to knock off Alabama. They don't have to be big plays, but consistent plays, just so they can manipulate the defense more so running the football. I like Alabama in this ball game. They can run downhill and chew up the TOP, and on defense, they're a good box and perimeter defense. Their front seven does a great job versus the run, so I like Alabama to knock off Auburn in this year's Iron Bowl.